Alright. So some of the things that come up with Surah Al-Fatiha, not the tafsir part basically, but more of the application part of Al-Fatiha. For example, we say Ameen at the end of Surah Al-Fatiha. Right? Is Ameen a part of Surah Al-Fatiha? Is it not part of Surah Al-Fatiha? It's not part of the surah, but it's something that it's a sunnah to say at the end, whether you are praying in salah or out of salah. Right? You read Al-Fatiha in or out of salah, it's a sunnah to say Ameen. And what does Ameen mean? It just means, oh Allah, respond. Respond, we're begging of you to respond and accept the supplication that we make. That's why after we make dua, we say Ameen. Right? And it's important to note that some of the ulama, they point out as well that the way you pronounce Ameen is also important. It's not Ameen with a shadda on the meme, because that's a different word. That's a different word. That means the qasidin, or the people that are seeking or looking for something else. That's what that means. So even the way you say it has to be correct. So sometimes people make a mistake and they'll put a stress on the meme. They'll say Ameen, which makes it into an entirely different word. So it's Ameen, right, with the long a and then just short meme, right? It's as simple as I can put it. Ameen. So it's a sunnah to say it in and out of salah. Again, what does the word sunnah mean? This is why I'm using these words to understand what it is. It's a sunnah to say it. When you say the word sunnah relating to Islamic law, basically it means if you do it, you're rewarded for it. If you don't do it, you're not penalized. Right? So this is the word sunnah referring to practice or fiqh or Islamic law. Right? So it's a sunnah to say it means you're rewarded if you say it. If you don't say it, you're not penalized for not saying it. There's no sin in not saying it. So it comes up that if you forget to say it in your salah, if you did Surah Al-Fatiha and you didn't say Ameen, you don't have to go back and repeat or anything like that. It's okay. If you're not penalized for not saying it, so you can continue on with your salah. So it may happen that you're reading Surah Al-Fatiha, but you just forget to say Ameen. So it's no big deal if you forget to say Ameen. You just continue on with your salah. Now, do you say it loud or do you say it quiet? Right? This is one of those hot topics, right, which you just don't want to touch. Do you say it loudly or do you say it quietly? There's difference of opinion, and you can see that the schools of thought are basically divided up on this into two camps. The Imam Abu Hanifa and the school of Imam Abu Hanifa and the school of Imam Malik, generally they say that you say Ameen quietly, you don't say it out loud. Right? And again, within each school of thought, there may be scholars that disagree. But generally, the Hanafi school, the Maliki school, they say you don't say Ameen out loud. Whether you're reading the Fatiha out loud or whether you're reading it quietly, you say Ameen quietly. Right? And they have a narration from one of the Sahaba as an evidence for that. The school of Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, it says that you say it quietly in the quiet prayers. So Dhuhr, right? You don't just say Ameen out loud, right? After you read Al-Fatiha silently. You just say it silently. And in the prayers where the Imam is reciting loudly, then you say it loudly as well. And there are hadith to support this as well. So if you fall into one of these groups, right? So if you're already following one school of thought, you know what you're doing, right? If you're not, you want to just take my opinion, then the second one, inshallah, is the better. The Prophet would say Ameen out loud. But again, all of that is acceptable bi'idhnillah, inshallah ta'ala. So we don't make a big deal out of any of these things, inshallah. There's a very interesting story. We're studying Adab al-Ikhtilaf. One of the courses we had to take in a university was the adab. What's the good translation for the word adab?
Ethics of disagreement.
The ethics of disagreement. And we read this story where Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah was actually a student of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, right? So he studied with them a lot. In the early Hanafi books, the Hanafi books of law, you actually find the opinion of Imam Shafi'i mentioned, which is really interesting. They mention the opinion of Imam Shafi'i, which when he was in Iraq as well, he would study with them. So basically Imam Shafi'i was with his camp somewhere, and he was going to be visited by some of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah. So he told his students, he says, the students of Imam Abu Hanifa are coming, and they're going to arrive here probably at the time of Maghrib. He said, okay, and we're going to have them one of them lead the salah. And I am telling you, they do not say Ameen out loud after the Fatiha, so I am forbidding you from saying Ameen out loud after the Fatiha out of respect for them, right? Out of respect for them, this is something he said. And so, they showed up, and they're arguing who's going to lead the prayer. They refused to lead the prayer. Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, leads the prayer. And then he reads the prayer, and then he says, وَلَا-ضَالِينَ, and then he hears behind him, Ameen, really loud. Right? So as soon as the salah is over, he turns around and he said, I told you out of respect for them, we're not going to say Ameen out loud. And his students said, Shaykh, we didn't do it, they did it. Right? They're the ones that said Ameen. So it shows you these things are not that big of a deal. The ulama themselves who held these opinions did not make a big deal out of it. So inshallah, both of these things are acceptable. One of the important things about Fatiha is that it must be recited in its entirety. It must be recited in its entirety. That includes all the ayat of Al-Fatiha, all the words in Al-Fatiha, all the letters of Al-Fatiha, and all the vowel sounds. The vowels, meaning the a, e, and u, right? Which we call the fatha, damma, kasra, or zayr, zabar, pesh, for those who speak in Urdu, right? So all of this has to be included in Al-Fatiha. This is why it's extremely important to learn how to recite Al-Fatiha properly. At least Al-Fatiha. The Fatiha is the thing that you must say in your salah. Every other surah is, it's an option to go beyond that. So the Fatiha must be pronounced properly, to the point where the ulama, they say even every single shadda that comes in Al-Fatiha has to be pronounced properly. So leaving off an ayah would not be acceptable. Leaving off a letter would not be acceptable, right? So, for example, instead of saying Rabbil Alameen, if you said Rabbil without the shadda, without the stopping and the going, Rabbi, right? Rabbi. If you were to say Rabbi, you've missed one of the ba, because there's two bas, right? You stop on one and then you start the other. So you have to learn to read Al-Fatiha properly. And we've talked about working hard, about being good at our religion. This is something that we have to do. We have to give time to learn how to recite Surah Al-Fatiha properly, because it's a part of the salah. The Prophet said, لا صلاة لمن لم يقرأ بفاتحة الكتاب. There is no prayer for the one who does not read the Fatiha al-Kitab, Surah Al-Fatiha, in his salah. So this is something which is very important. Even if you mess up one of the harakat, one of the vowel sounds, you can change the meaning, right? You can change the meaning. So if you said صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم, أنعمت عليهم is the correct way. If you messed up and you said أنعمت عليهم, then you're saying the path of those who I bestowed favor upon. So you see how that drastically changes the meaning? You're the one claiming the favor accidentally by changing just one way you pronounce one of the letters of the surah. So learning how to pronounce it properly is of extreme importance. And last but not least, back the wrong way. This is the last one, inshallah. Oh, actually, yeah, okay. Reciting the Fatiha behind the Imam. Right, this is also one of the areas where the ulama, they disagree. If the Imam is reciting in Salat al-Dhuhr, which is silent, or Salat al-Maghrib, which is out loud, do you recite Al-Fatiha behind the Imam, or do you just stay silent? Again, this is an issue where the ulama, they disagree upon. Generally, the schools of thought fall into this category. Again, within each school of thought, within each madhab, some of the scholars may disagree and hold different opinions. But generally, this is how it breaks down. So in the Hanbali school and the Maliki school, especially the early Hanbali school, you recite Al-Fatiha when in the quiet prayers, meaning Dhuhr and Asr, when everybody's reading quietly, right? When the Imam is reading silently, then you do recite Al-Fatiha and another surah, but you do so silently. And in the prayers where the Imam reads out loud, for Maghrib, Isha, and Fajr, you don't recite Al-Fatiha, and you listen to the Quran that he's reciting. Okay, so this is the first opinion, the first camp, the school of Imam Ahmad and the school of Imam Malik. You do recite in the silent prayers, and you don't recite when the Imam is reciting out loud. And again, there are scholars within this maybe each school that hold different opinions. For example, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen actually holds the opinion that no, you recite out loud either ways, which is the Shafi'i opinion as well. In the Hanafi school of thought, you don't recite behind the Imam, period. So the recitation of the Imam is your recitation, as in one of the hadith. The recitation of the Imam is your recitation. So whether it's a silent prayer, whether it's a prayer where the Imam is reading loudly, in the Hanafi school, they do not read at all, right? Or they're encouraged not to, they don't have to read Surah Al-Fatiha at all behind the Imam. And in the Shafi'i school, you recite it behind the Imam regardless, if it's a silent prayer or if it's a prayer where the Imam is reciting loudly, right? So even in Maghrib, Isha, and Fajr, you would recite Surah Al-Fatiha, even with the Imam or after the Imam is reciting, and in the periods where the Imam is breaking between the ayat or whatever it is, but you would recite behind the Imam regardless. And again, this is generally how each school of thought breaks down. There might be scholars that hold various opinions within each school of thought as well. So again, if you already fall into any of these camps, then you know what to do, right? If you're already a Hanafi, if you're already a Shafi'i, if you're already a Hanbali Maliki, it's easy for you to figure out what you're supposed to do, right? Want to ask my opinion? I generally follow the Hanbali madhab, and I agree with the opinion that when the Imam is reciting quietly, you recite as well, and when the Imam is reciting out loud, you stay silent and you don't recite, because of the ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنُ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا. Right? And when the Quran is recited, then you listen to it and you remain silent. But again, there's difference of opinion as to the application of it, again, within the different schools of thought. But this is something, again, I want to cover. Again, not a big deal. Understand why people are doing different things, right? Why is it that somebody's reciting and I'm not reciting? Or I'm reciting and he's not reciting? Instead of getting upset and worried, at least we understand that different schools of thought have a different opinion in this issue. But all of them require that Fatiha has to be read. If you're praying behind the Imam has to read it. If you're praying by yourself, you have to read it. Right? So it's just a difference of opinion on, in Jama'ah, when you're praying in congregation, do you read behind the Imam or not? It's not really a big difference of opinion or a big deal at all, inshallah. That's that. So that is the conclusion of Fatiha. Alhamdulillah, Ameen.